But these seed oils, they stick around in your body for years. The half-life is 680 days. That means if you stopped eating them today, 680 days later, half of those fats will still be in your cells creating inflammation. I just did 90 days of a carnivore diet where I ate nothing but meat and fat for 90 days. Not one carb or not one vegetable. But you know what my lab showed?
I hate kale. Why do we hate kale so much, Ben?
Oxalates are these tiny little crystals. You can't see it. They're like these sharp little needles that poke holes in your gut.
It completely shreds your gut. People are having oat milk not knowing it completely spikes your blood sugar and it's full of garbage and preservatives.
75% of the population cannot process pasteurized dairy.
But it's the pasteurization process.
Correct.
The dairy is not the problem.
I think we live in a world where we're brainwashed to believe that we cannot heal ourselves, that it's a medication that we need.
Hi guys, so we're back for another episode of Biohack-it, and this time we're on with my friend Ben Azadi. Ben is like the king of keto, and keto has become such a hot topic, but there's so much still gray area around about what we should be doing or not. So I'm just excited to get you on and talk about your health and wellness journey. You lost 80 pounds of pure fat doing keto. So Ben, let's get into it.
Iman, I'm so excited to be here with you. We're going to have a lot of fun.
We are.
Yeah, that's my story, 80 pounds of fat.
And I mean, how did you even do that? Like, I cannot imagine losing 80 pounds of pure fat. And how long was the time frame?
9 months. This is back in 2008.
It's crazy. And so is that what introduced you to keto and living this lifestyle?
Actually, no, it wasn't until 2014 that I started to get into keto. So I lost the weight. I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. And what sparked me to even make that change was I was obviously physically obese, but also mentally obese. So I was depressed and suicidal, going through a really, really tough time. And I started to pick up books, Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, and these books helped me take ownership and responsibility. So I thought, hey, I was blaming everybody else for my problems. I was blaming my slow metabolism, my bad genetics, and every other stinking thinking thought. But when I took responsibility, everything changed for me. I started to move my body, eat better food. And in 9 months, I lost the weight. But I was now one of those fit, sick people. And I looked good on the outside, but I was still unhealthy in the inside. So I was exploring different diets, like a paleo diet. I even did a vegan diet for a year and a half. And in 2014, that's when I discovered keto. And I just fell in love with it. It took my health from average to above average to eventually like super healthy. And ever since then, I've been teaching it and learning a lot about it, unlearning and relearning. And we'll talk a lot about that today.
And for the guests listening, Ben and I actually met on a panel that we were both on, and you spoke so well and so passionately about keto. I was like, this is the guy for keto, basically. You knew everything about it. So this is what I thought about the podcast. I'm like, this is why I have to get him on, because you break it down into such an easy science for people to understand, because there is so much information out there. So I want to get into what is keto and what is ketosis, like breaking it down for our guests who might not know even the baseline.
Absolutely, yeah. And most people hear keto and they think of it as a weight loss diet. And while it can be that, it's so much more than that. And actually, technically, it's not even a diet. It's a metabolic process. So our ancestors all went through ketosis. They all did ketosis, and I'll explain what that means. But there's nothing new about keto. I just want to say that right up the front, right off the gate. It's nuanced or new to some people, but there's nothing new about it. It's been around forever. So when we lower our carbohydrate intake, we allow our body to turn on a switch that allows us to burn body fat. And we do that by lowering insulin. So the hormone insulin stores fat, carbohydrates raise insulin. So when we lower carbohydrates, then we lower insulin, and now we unlock the key to fat burning. And when you burn fat, that fat is sent to your liver, and your liver produces ketones.
Right.
So ketosis is the state of being in ketosis. Ketones are simply these molecules that your liver produces, and it fuels your body, it fuels your brain, but it's a byproduct of burning body fat. And a lot of people, especially here in America, 93% of Americans are unhealthy. They really need this process. I call them, they're in a keto deficiency, essentially. So when you are in a state of ketosis, you lower inflammation. Your cells produce more energy. They communicate with their mitochondria to produce more energy. And one of the main things that people notice is what it does for their brain fog. Their brain gets turned on, and they now are mentally clear, and they could remember people's names, and they could go into a room and remember why they walked into that room before they would forget. So ketones are great. It's great for diabetes. It's great for PCOS. It's great for insulin resistance. But I don't do it personally for any of that. I do it for the health benefits, and I feel really good when I'm in a state of ketosis.
And then for people, like, let's say they're trying to cheat it, there's all these ketone products on the market now, right? What's your take on that? Because you really know the space.
There's a time and place for it. You're referring to exogenous ketones. And there's 3 different types of exogenous ketones. There's salts and esters and something called butanediol. There's a time and place for all of them. I think that some companies make some really good exogenous ketones, but what I don't like is that people are just eating a high carb diet and just taking ketones, and they test their ketones and say, look, I'm in ketosis. That is not the same thing as being in ketosis via changing your lifestyle. So if you're going to do keto, you want to do it the way where your body's producing those ketones. Now, where would you fit in exogenous ketones? I take them as a biohack, as a brain performance thing.
As a booster in the morning, maybe.
Yeah, or
with
a
your
booster in the
coffee.
morning or before a workout, or even like when I'm traveling, because there's a lot of radiation you're dealing with on airplanes. You take it, it helps with radiation, but you're not taking it to bypass doing the work. You got to do the work and then add it as a supplement the way that I believe it was intended to be used.
And then a lot of people have this really unhealthy keto diet, right?
Yeah.
They eat like terribly. So let's get into what you should be eating doing a healthy version of keto versus what a lot of people end up doing.
Yeah, you make a good point. So there's many ways to do keto, hundreds of different ways to do keto. Not every keto diet or keto approach is healthy. There's dirty keto, which you were referencing, and then there's clean keto. So fats, for example, when you do keto, you're going to eat more fats, but not all fats are created equal. There are a set of fats, these dietary fats, that are arguably more inflammatory than sugar and smoking. And I say that because I've actually interviewed Dr. Kate Shanahan, who was the nutritionist for the Los Angeles Lakers for actually Kobe Bryant when he used to play. And she's a New York Times bestselling author. She's a friend of mine. And I said, Dr. Kate, which scenario is going to lead to disease faster? Smoking cigarettes every day, eating processed sugar every day, or eating these bad fats every day? And she laughed and she said, Ben, that's an easy answer. It is hands down the bad fats.
And it's because of all the seed oils and everything else.
The seed oils, the vegetable oils are what they're called.
Yeah.
And here's the reason why. When you smoke a cigarette, you're done with the last puff, damage has been done.
Yes.
When you eat processed sugar, yes, it's going to raise your blood sugar levels, but then you could go exercise and it'll go back to where it was. But these seed oils, these vegetable oils you mentioned, they stick around in your body for years. The half-life is 680 days.
What?
680 days.
That's how long it takes to get rid of seed oils? So
Half of them. That's how long it takes to get rid of half of them.
So imagine if you're eating really clean at home and then you go to a restaurant and they're using seed oils to cook.
Correct.
So technically you're never getting rid of them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Ben, you broke my heart right now.
I know. I'm sorry. But what you can do is, and we'll talk about this more, fasting helps with this. Repairing your phospholipids. We have Jess Berman, our friend from BodyBio. They have some great fats to regenerate those membranes. Eating healthier fats are a faster way to replace them. So there's ways to speed it up for sure.
And what are your staples that you love when it comes to like being on ketosis? Because you cycle it in and out that we're also going to talk about.
Yeah.
So because some people are so rigid about being like, if you're on keto, you cannot get off and you cannot go cycling it in and out. But that's a hard way for some people to live, right? Especially when you're traveling and you want to eat a meal with a friend. So I want to talk about what are some of your, things that you think are clean, the best way to do it. Like, take me through a day.
Yeah. And I don't think you should be in ketosis long-term. I'm not a proponent of that at all. I'm not dogmatic about keto. It's one very powerful tool, but it's not the only tool. So that's what separates, I think, me from a lot of people in my space. And I'll speak at these keto conferences and these low-carb conferences. And I got to tell you, a lot of my colleagues don't like that messaging that we shouldn't be keto forever, but we shouldn't. It's one system to burn energy, but it's not the only system.
Right.
We're designed to go back and forth. And then it's a concept called metabolic flexibility, which we'll talk about as well.
Because that's what happened. I was like considering it and somebody's like, well, if you're in it, you have to stay in it. And I'm like, listen, I'm South Asian. I grew up eating, my roti and I like my rice. And so I don't want to be like dogmented into that in such a way that I'm stuck and that doesn't give me flexibility. Then I start hating my food. So I want to be able to be flexible yet still healthy.
And that's the way it should be. You want something that's sustainable, to your point, right? It's not realistic to avoid carbohydrates for the rest of your life, nor should you. Once you develop a healthy metabolism, then you could burn carbohydrates when you need to, and then go back to burning fat and back and forth. And that really is what
how you should be living.
How we should be living, what metabolic flexibility is. But in the beginning, you do want to be pretty strict with it, right? Because there are studies that show, and this is the reason I'm writing my new book. There are studies that show 88% to 93% of United States people who live in the United States are metabolically unhealthy. Only 7 to 12% of us are actually metabolically healthy. They're stuck burning sugar and glucose. And if you want to age fast, be stuck burning sugar and glucose, right? So they're in a keto deficiency. So for them, they need to be a little bit rigid in the beginning, a little bit strict, and experience ketosis, repair their metabolism. Then it comes to a point where you could start getting in and out of ketosis, and that's what I call keto flexing.
And then walk me through like a day when you're coaching clients and stuff as well, and you lead a lot of seminars and stuff. When somebody starts coaching with you and you get them into they haven't done keto ever before. So what does a day look like, and how long do they have to be a little bit more strict before they become flexible?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure somebody watching this is wondering the same thing. So the first step is to gradually decrease their total carbs, total carbohydrates. The average American is consuming somewhere between 300 and 400 grams of carbs per day. In order to achieve ketosis and fat burning, that needs to be under 50 total grams per day.
50 total grams.
50.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, but we don't want to go from 400 to 50.
Yeah, because your body will have a shock.
Your body will have a shock, and you'll have symptoms, and you're not going to feel good. So it's about a 7-day protocol where you're gradually decreasing it, but at the same time, you're increasing your proteins and fats. So high quality protein, I personally like animal-based protein, but fats would be like saturated fats, monounsaturated fats. To give your audience an example, coconut oil, olive oil, seafood, eggs, etc. Those would be healthy fats. And after about 7 days of making this switch, you should be now fat adapted, where you're burning fat instead of sugar. You're in ketosis. How long you stay there is very different. In general, I have people stay there for 45 days. And then at that point, we'll assess whether we are going to flex in and out or not. If somebody still has, let's say, type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance or PCOS at that point, we'll keep them in ketosis longer. If somebody doesn't have that and they actually responded very well, they're pretty healthy now, then we'll flex out. And the flexing is different depending on men versus women and how active you are.
And age and all that stuff.
Age, et cetera, yeah.
And then what does it mean to be metabolically flexible? Because I want to talk about this concept. And, people listening to this, I'm somebody who's being told I'm not metabolically that flexible, actually, and I'm working my way into it now without doing anything drastic. So I want to hear from you what it means to be metabolically flexible.
Metabolically flexible is the key for everybody. And that's why I'm not dogmatic about keto, because I think that's another form, when you're in ketosis forever, I think it's another form of metabolic inflexibility. Now, most people are metabolically inflexible because they're stuck burning sugar and they need to burn fat, but the people in my space are only burning fat and they forgot how to burn sugar. So it's just another variation of it. Both are not good. So what it means, so metabolism, the Greek definition for metabolism means to transform. That's what they refer to as metabolism. So we take food, we take air, and our cells, our mitochondria, change that into energy. Where we take food, we produce energy, we burn fat, we feel good. When we're metabolically inflexible, we're not doing a good job at that. We're only probably good at burning carbs, but not burning fat and protein. So somebody who's really metabolically flexible and what I call metabolically free, they could take any substrate, sugar, fat, protein, or even not eat anything and allow their body to burn body fat via fasting, and they feel great. The numbers look great. They're burning fat, they feel good, they have amazing energy. So that is the goal, to be able to burn whatever energy source is available at any time and feel good while you do it.
Another big thing is cellular health in all of this, right?
Yeah.
So if your cells aren't doing the operation correctly, which is why PC and all is so important, your body can't restrain anything else, right? You can't hold it together when you are trying to detox or going into these different states. So when you're coaching people, and if their cellular health isn't great with all the seed oils and stuff like that, what do you recommend to them?
Yeah, you're right. Cellular health is everything. My mentor, Dr. Pompa, always says, if you want to get well, you got to fix the cell. And we have 50 to 70 trillion cells in our body. They're all really important for functioning, for burning fat, for energy production, for hormones. So all your hormones need to connect to your cells and the receptor sites around the cells. And if there's too much inflammation around the cell, good things cannot get in, bad things cannot get out, and then you get a symptom. And what we have learned from conventional medicine is that your symptom is bad. Here's a medication to mask it up, which leads to a second and a third symptom, and et cetera, keeping you hooked on medication. But the symptoms are not the problem. Symptoms are a gift from the innate intelligence. It's the gift from the way God built the body. It's the body's check engine light. So the cause of the symptom is what's important, and usually that's cellular inflammation. So eating high carbohydrates in excess leads to cellular inflammation.
Absolutely.
Eating seed oils in excess, or even a small amount, as we made the case, leads to cellular inflammation. So we first determine what the person is doing that has caused the inflammation. We start removing the interference, and then the body goes and it heals itself. But when you have inflammation around your cells, it's going to lead to hormone resistance. And that leads to the inability to lose weight, no matter how hard you try to diet or exercise, because your fat burning hormones can't get into the cell. And if it can't get into the cell, it doesn't matter how many calories you cut or how much exercise you do, the hormones need to get into the cell. So inflammation is the key. We want to lower inflammation. Ketones are amazing for that. Getting rid of seed oils are amazing for that. Of course, we'll talk about things like fasting and other ways to do that. Biohacks, there's so many things we can do. So that's the first step. What is the cause, or the cause is? Let's remove that, and then the person starts to heal.
And then we spoke about fasting a little bit here and there. Let's get into intermittent fasting. So one, the difference between intermittent fasting for men and women, I want to go into. And two, when somebody does start going into keto and coaching with you and all that stuff, how many hours should they start when it comes to fasting?
The first thing I have them do is first to get fat adapted. So they first do keto before they do any fasting. It makes it so much easier. Because when you fast too soon, what happens is your body's not metabolically as flexible as we want. So your body starts to panic. The brain panics because glucose drops in the brain, and then it tells your body, go eat carbohydrates, so they get cravings. And if you don't eat the food, it'll break down muscle or even raise cortisol to get that glucose response. But when you have done keto, ketones are there and you don't have that problem. So the first step is keto, get fat adapted. Second step is to practice fasting. And I'll explain the difference between men and women and some of the general rules of thumb in terms of the schedule. But I want people to understand, just like keto, there's nothing new about fasting. It's been around forever as well. It's not new, it's just nuanced. These are called ancient healing strategies. They've been around forever. And every single one of our cells are hardwired for the old school. It's hardwired for ketosis. It's hardwired for fasting. It's hardwired for feasting as well. Too many people do too much fasting, they forget about the feasting too. So you want to balance it out as well. We'll talk more about that. But when we are in a fasted state, Iman, so many things happen in the body that are remarkable. You see, the innate intelligence doesn't know that I could grab my cell phone, go on the Uber Eats app and click on the button and we'll have somebody knock on the door in 45 minutes with food. It doesn't understand that we can go to a refrigerator and get food. When we're in a fast, it says, whoa, there must be a famine. Let's do everything possible to keep this body alert, energized, and functioning at a high level so it could go out there into the wild and hunt and kill. It doesn't know that we're trying to do this on purpose, right? So when you're in a fasted state, one of the things that happens that I love is a process called autophagy. And autophagy is something that people are hearing about. The Greeks call autophagy eat thyself. That's their term for it, which sounds super weird. But autophagy is amazing. It's one of the best ways to reverse conditions like cancer and autoimmune disease, and even better, prevent it. And the analogy I like to give for people to understand autophagy is the analogy of a refrigerator. Imagine we open up this refrigerator and we see all the groceries with expiration dates on it. But instead of using those groceries, we let them all expire. And then we don't throw away those expired groceries. We kind of just shove them towards the back of the fridge, and we go to Publix or Whole Foods, the supermarket. We buy new groceries and we put those in front of the old groceries and just close that door.
Right. It's garbage building up.
Garbage building up. It's going to be a toxic environment. Disease will manifest in that environment. Well, the human body is like that refrigerator. We have cells and proteins and mitochondria that all have an expiration date. So autophagy is the process of getting rid of those expired groceries. The body is so smart that when you're not eating food, you're not getting food energy. Your body says, whoa, we need to get energy from somewhere. What does it do? It looks for cells that are inflamed and damaged, and it starts to fix it. It starts to clean out those cells. And if it determines a cell is not functioning, it's called a senescent cell. It sends a signal to get rid of that cell altogether through apoptosis, and then it produces a stem cell. And stem cells are like all the rage in the biohacking anti-aging space, right? People pay thousands of dollars, but you could actually get stem cells for free when you practice fasting. So there are way more benefits than that. That's probably my favorite benefit, and also what it does to reset your digestive system and your gut microbiome. But how should you do it? Men and women definitely do it differently. So men have more of a hormone recycling pattern that is 24 hours, similar to the sun. Sun comes up and sets in 24 hours. Menstruating women have more of a 28-day pattern, similar to the moon. And then postmenopausal women have more hormones similar to men, more rapid recycling. So based off of that, men could be more aggressive. That's why, you have two people, husband and wife, who do the same protocol. Maybe it's keto and fasting, and husband loses 12 pounds in 2 weeks. And the woman's like, what the heck?
What the hell just happened?
What the hell? Yeah, it's not fair, because our hormones are different. We have more testosterone. We have more of a recycling pattern. So men could be aggressive. Great news for men. Menstruating women want to go with their hormonal cycle. Those 28 days, every week is a different pattern. So you do it differently. I don't have time to go over all the intricacies there, but what I will say is that the week before the menstrual cycle is the week where you do not want to do fasting.
And then fast, actually, I've read this everywhere, and Dr. Mendepilas talks about it too. You're supposed to fast most aggressively while you're on your cycle.
Correct. The week of the period, the bleed week, is when you want to do the most fasting. So when hormones are low, fasting is high. When hormones need to be high, fasting is low. That's something that I learned along the way. So the first week of the period, hormones are naturally low. So fasting in keto is high, which sounds counterintuitive. But what I remember asking, because I'm not a female, so I don't have a menstrual cycle, obviously. But when I work with a lot of females who do, and I would ask them, when do you get those cravings? And it's usually the week before their period, leading up to it. Would you agree to that? Yeah,
completely.
And that is the innate intelligence kind of giving you a clue that you need a carb up. You don't go against the way your natural way, the way that God built your metabolism. So it makes sense. But once you have the bleed, the menstrual cycle, then you could fast. You could do keto and you could be more aggressive.
And even when it comes to working out, I want to get into that as well. With ketosis, what kind of workouts should you be doing to support ketosis?
In the beginning, I wouldn't recommend implementing too much exercise because your body has to adapt to these different things. Keto is a stress to the body.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like fasting is, just like exercise is. So when you stack too many stresses all at once, the body can't adapt to it and then you feel awful. So I would start with keto and then I would start to incorporate exercise, and you can do whatever you do. Whatever your routine is, keep doing it. Whether it's CrossFit or UFC gym or whatever it is, your own workout, you could still do it, but always pay attention to how you feel the rest of the day.
Right. You
should feel more energized after a workout or any biohack that you do, not depleted. If you feel more depleted, you did too much.
It's not working for you.
Working for you.
What's your take on protein shakes?
Protein shakes have their place. A high quality protein shake could supplement eating the real food, but nothing is going to replace eating the real food.
Totally.
It's processed. It's quick absorbing, and there's a lot of protein shakes that don't have a lot of clean ingredients. They have artificial sweeteners in it. So I will personally use protein shakes from time to time from a clean source, but it's not something I do every day. It's more of an exception when I'm like out of time and I don't feel like cooking. So I see its role, but I think people rely on it too much.
And how many grams of protein do you think men need to get into a day, whether they're on keto and then off keto, and same with women?
The recommendation is the same.
Okay, it is?
Yeah, the recommendation is the same. So it's 1 gram of protein per pound of their ideal body weight.
Okay.
Now what's different here is their ideal body weight. So I'll give you an example just in case somebody doesn't understand what I mean by that. A man or woman, let's say they weigh 180 pounds, but their goal weight, their ideal body weight is 150 pounds. They would consume 150 grams of protein each day to hit that requirement.
Wow.
If you're older, over the age of 65, that would actually increase more because you're losing a lot of muscle at that time and bone density. So you would actually have more protein. But 1 gram protein per pound of ideal body weight for both men and women is my recommendation.
And what is your favorite way to get in protein? Like, how do you start your day? Yeah. Well, we went for dinner,
Yeah, exactly.
We had the nice steak, But what do you eat in an ideal day? What do you eat from your morning to AM to PM?
So I personally don't have breakfast.
Okay.
I do fasting and I do really well. I usually have a lot going on in the morning. I like to be like super sharp. So I feel really good fasted. So I usually don't eat until like 12 or 1 p.m. I'll have coffee though in the morning with a little bit of some heavy cream and that's it. What I do eat around noon or so is usually meat. That's usually my go-to, or eggs. So some sort of steak, egg. Sometimes I have seafood like salmon, etc. If I'm in a rush, I'll have the protein shake as a supplement. But I do really well with mostly meat. I don't eat a lot. I eat some vegetables, but my diet is mostly meat.
And that's amazing. And what else do you... Like, for example, do you add in when you want to have a cheat day? How are you cheating? Because I know you don't really cheat, but if you want to take a day off, what would you do?
Yeah, I feast. I definitely feast, and I'll have carbs. I'll have sugar. What I don't make an exception on are the seed oils and gluten. I don't have gluten or wheat.
And that takes a lot of the stress out of it, right? Because I think it's the gluten and it's the seed oils that really put you into distress.
Yeah, those are so inflammatory, both of them.
And when you're eating out at restaurants, how do you mitigate that?
I use my seed oil allergy card. I actually have some here.
Can you take it out, Ben? I want to see it right now.
I thought we were going to talk about it.
I want to see it.
So first of all, before I share it, I'll preface it by saying, for years, I would go to restaurants and I would tell the server that I'm allergic to vegetable oils. Can you use real oil, butter, etc.?
Right.
And I had been telling my students to do that for years, but they feel uncomfortable. People feel uncomfortable making that request, especially when you're with like other people.
Yeah,
people that you are just meeting, right? I don't really care about that, but people do.
Yeah.
So I developed this seed oil allergy card, and there's the camera right there. So the seed oil allergy card on here, I'll read it just in case you can't see it. It says allergy card. So it has like a big flashy thing, allergy card at the top. Dear chef, I have food allergies to vegetable oils. In order for me to avoid an allergic reaction, I must avoid the oils marked down below. And it has 8 of the bad oils with an X next to it. Below that, it says the following alternatives are safe, and then it has a healthy option. So I tell them, take it back to the, you can keep that, by the way. That's for you.
I'm keeping this. This is amazing.
And your audience can get that for free, by the way. They could download like the digital version of it and just show it on your phone. It's seedoilcard.com. Anybody can get
this is amazing. That's why I'm going to be rocking up to restaurants now. This is really amazing.
It works really well, more so than saying it's a preference, because they don't want to get sued. Of
course, because then you're giving them
something it's an allergy. Yeah, and that makes it official too.
And there is also an app. I forgot what it's called, but essentially you can Google or put in restaurants according to your zip code, and it tells you which restaurants are seed oil free. Which unfortunately they're not that many.
Seed Oil Scalp is the
that's amazing.
Seed Oil Scalp is the
that's what it's called, right? Yeah. Okay, that's another really good one. And it's unfortunate. I don't think Miami has as many options as, places like Austin or New York or LA, but we are starting to catch up. But I think there has to be a time and a place where actually restaurants want better produce for their guests.
The more we make those requests, the more they're going to do it. Because the reason they use these seed oils, even fancy restaurants, I know you've seen it, it's because it's cheap.
Yeah.
It's super cheap to use. But the more we make these requests, the more they're going to see there's a demand for this. And it's so important. I mean, like I mentioned, 680 days. And let me just unpack that real quick, because in case that went over somebody's head.
I'm going to say that.
That means if you stop eating these oils today, and I'll list them for you. It's canola, corn, cottonseed oil, soybean, safflower, sunflower oil, and grapeseed and rice bran oil. Those are the 8 bad ones right there. If you stopped eating them today, 680 days later, half of those fats will still be in your cells creating inflammation, right? 5 to 6 years later, they're finally removed, right? So we don't want to take that hit.
Yeah.
We don't want to do it, and you don't have to. The cool thing about restaurants, the safest options are going to be like real authentic Greek and Italian restaurants.
Right.
Because they're going to use real olive oil. And if they don't, they're not real or authentic.
And you shouldn't be going there then, supporting their business. They're lying about the restaurant, right? That's why they eat the Mediterranean diet, right? Because it's such a clean diet, It really allows for a lot of protein to be, taken in. They cook a lot with olive oils. Yes. So it's a very clean diet, and it has, certain vegetables there, and it's all grilled.
Yeah, exactly.
So Mediterranean
grilled is your safest bet. There's no oil. But I will say this. Even if it's grilled, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, you still want to ask them, because sometimes they'll marinate it with the vegetable oil and then they'll grill it. And you think it's safe because it's grilled, but it might be marinated in vegetable oil.
Ben, what do you do for fiber? Because we're doing all this stuff with the healthy fats and the protein. What do we do about fiber when you're doing keto?
Yeah, I will say that I'm not as huge on fiber as other people are.
Right.
It's not that I don't have fiber, but I don't think it's like
the be all and end all.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's been overplayed. I'll get fiber I'll have vegetables. I'll have like lower plant toxin vegetables. So for me, I'll have like arugula, artichokes, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, squash, and there's fiber in that, but I'm not really hitting a target. And I'll tell you something really interesting. I just did 90 days of a carnivore diet.
Okay.
Where I ate nothing but meat and fat for 90 days. Not one carb or not one vegetable. And I did it as an experiment. So I did a whole bunch of lab testing on day one, a $3,500 lab panel from LabCorp on day one. I did a stool test on day one. I put on a continuous glucose monitor on day one. And then I ate nothing but meat for 90 days. And then on day 90, I did the whole test again. $3,500 panel, stool test. And the stool test was the most interesting thing.
Yeah, because that's where they test, your microbiome and everything.
Your diversity, the bacteria. And to your point, when I did my day one stool test, it said my diversity was okay. It could be better. And in order to increase that, add more fiber, add more plants, do less keto, less meat. And what did I do, Iman?
The opposite. Yeah.
So on day 90, when I got my results, you would think that the results would be a disaster, because I went against what the lab told me to do and what most people did. But you know what my lab showed? Everything improved. My diversity increased. I developed 7 keystone bacteria on day 90 that I did not have on day 1.
How is that possible? Is it like grass-fed, grass-finished meat? It was coming through there?
For the most part it is, but I was at restaurants that didn't have that. So what happened there was that I stressed my gut microbiome.
To grow itself.
Correct. When you stress it, you actually create more diversity. So by just eating meat and fat for 90 days, it was a stress to my gut. And that actually created more diversity in the gut. Now,
That's
if I would have
insane.
stuck with carnivore for 6 months, I would have seen the opposite effect.
Yes,
So
because you
there's
do
a
it for
sweet spot
enough
there. Yeah.
time for it to stress you enough for then to do its job, get it done, and then go back to kind of being flexible, like you
Correct.
say.
Even the chief scientific officer for this company that I did the stool test with, 10 Health, he saw my results and he's like, can I review this with you on a Zoom call?
Yeah.
So he gave me like this free 60-minute consult because he thought it was so fascinating, because I told him about the experiment. And he said it changed the way he thought about gut health. This guy's been in this research field for 25 years. And what I did to show him was the opposite of what most people would say. So it's usually not what you think.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
What about for people that guts are extremely destroyed from like over antibiotic use and things like that? Would this have the same effect, you think, on people like that?
Oh, they would really need a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Because when your gut is destroyed and you have leaky gut, which most people do, and you eat a lot of plants, those plants contain...
Shred.
Yeah, they contain anti-nutrients that shred the gut.
Yeah.
It makes it worse. So by eliminating them short term, 30, it doesn't have to be 90 days, but 30 days or so, you allow that digestive system to heal itself. And then you start to incorporate. It's like an elimination diet, essentially. It's a fantastic diet.
I hate kale. And I know from medical... You're right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about why do we hate kale so much, Ben?
Yeah.
So bad
I'm
for
with
you.
Kale is loaded with anti-nutrients and oxalates. Oxalates are nasty. Oxalates are these tiny little crystals. You can't see it looking at the kale. But
Obviously,
when they look at it with a microscope, they're like these sharp little needles that poke holes in your gut. Kale is loaded with them. You know what else? Especially in the keto space, almonds, almond flour loaded with oxalates. So is spinach as well.
Yeah.
And people are juicing raw kale, raw spinach. They're eating a whole bunch of raw almonds. That is the worst thing you can do for your gut.
It completely shreds your gut. And this is where all the, I'm getting enough fiber, I'm eating greens. And then you're like, that's actually worse for your gut than just eating like straight meat.
Seriously, no, eating straight meat will heal the gut. So they're going to get joint pain. They're going to get post-nasal drip by eating those foods. They're going to get inflammation by eating those foods. They're going to gain weight eating those foods, thinking that it's healthy, right? Everybody thinks kale is healthy. It's not. But there are safer options. I mentioned them: arugula, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, squash. Those are much better options. And in terms of nuts and seeds, macadamia nuts are great. Have you heard of pili nuts before?
No, what is that?
They're from the Philippines, but you can get them here in the United States. It's the highest fat, lowest carb nut in the world. Tastes like a buttery macadamia nut. It's really, really good. Those are safe. Walnuts are safe. Pecans are safe. So you just have to know which ones are safer for you.
That's amazing. Like you learn something new every day because a lot of these health food fads that come out or people promoting recipes and they're like, this is what I put in my smoothie. And I look at them, I'm like, girl, you should not be eating that kale.
No.
It's
Especially
so bad
raw.
for you.
If you're going to eat kale, at least cook it. It breaks down some of the
Same thing with the spinach, right?
Same
it's
thing.
like it really shreds your gut. And this is where people have, same with oat milk.
Yeah.
People are having oat milk not knowing it completely spikes your blood sugar and it's full of garbage and preservatives and things like that.
Glyphosate too.
Oh, full of glyphosate. And they're like, oh, but oat milk is a healthier option. It's like, no, raw milk is the healthiest. And you'll be surprised if you did proper raw milk, how healing it is for your gut, for your skin, for everything. But it's not available here. So that's where I think people struggle with the options.
Yeah.
What do you do for dairy?
Yeah, raw milk. So the loophole with that, you're right. It's not legal here. It's so stupid, right? Like, come on, raw milk.
People get it shipped from the Amish farms, but
in Pennsylvania, I've done that before. There's also the loopholes that you go to a local farmer. Like, so here in Miami, we have the Yellow Green Market in Fort Lauderdale or in Sheridan, Hollywood. And then we have ones in Coconut Grove. So you could just go there and buy it. And you're just saying it's for pet consumption. Yeah. And obviously it'll be for you. That's what I do.
And the pets.
Yeah, and the pets.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
to keep things safe. So you could do that. Pasteurized dairy is an issue, though.
Correct. Let's talk about that for a second.
You know, there's a study that showed 75% of the population, the adult population in the world, cannot process pasteurized dairy.
But it's the pasteurization process.
Correct.
The dairy is not the problem.
No.
And this is for anybody listening who has young kids and you're buying your children organic pasteurized milk. It is an issue.
It's the pasteurization. It's the heating of it. And they say because it kills all the bad bacteria, yeah, but then it kills all the good stuff too.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get raw, make sure it's from a good source. Heavy cream is safe. I use heavy cream, and I mentioned that earlier because it's mostly milk fat. Even if it's pasteurized, it's still mostly milk fat, not necessarily milk dairy. Other alternatives to oat milk would be macadamia nut milk and coconut milk, unsweetened, of course. Those would be fine as well. They don't mix as well as like a heavy cream in your coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, but any of those would be fine. Much better than oat milk or almond milk.
How much caffeine do you tend to have a day? Because you're like me, you're like high energy, super alert. So how much caffeine do you tend to have?
So I'm actually a slow oxidizer of caffeine. I did a genetic test and it was bad news for me because I love coffee and caffeine.
Yeah.
But when you metabolize coffee slow, which is a slow oxidizer, you're supposed to limit or avoid it because it stays in your system too long. So those are the people that typically get jittery, but I was never really getting jittery. It was just staying in my system too long. So I cut back I was having about 150 milligrams per day of caffeine, which is a lot. It's like, what is that, like 3 or 2 cups or so? Now I do 1 to 2 cups, and then I'll have some days where I have no caffeine just to kind of do a reset personally because I'm a slow oxidizer. But coffee could be super healing. Coffee
has so many benefits.
Yeah, it's a clean source. The number one sprayed crop in the world, along with corn and soy, is coffee.
It's coffee.
So you don't want to go to a regular coffee shop. You want to get it clean. There's so many benefits. There's antioxidants in coffee. Helps the liver produce bile, which helps with detoxification and breaking down fat. Great for the liver. But you want to make sure it's a clean source. And then you want to have a caffeine curfew, because even if you're not a slow metabolizer of caffeine, it's still going to be in your system. The half-life is about 8 hours. So there should be a caffeine curfew. I don't have caffeine after 12 p.m. So I think that's a good rule of thumb for people, to make sure you're done by 12 p.m. Because if you have it too late, it's going to still be in your system that night, and it'll impact your quality of sleep.
Right.
And I hear people saying, yeah, but I could have my espresso and go to bed. Yeah, that may be true, but you're not going to get quality deep sleep with that caffeine in your system.
And also, it's not really great to have coffee first thing in the morning. So you're supposed to wake up, your cortisol levels are already so high when you get up, right? And it's the brain is alert. You've slept. Why are you going straight to coffee? So it's always better to have it an hour and a half after you wake up. Cortisol levels start to come down naturally. Your body starts going to more of a rhythm, and then you introduce coffee into it. Otherwise, you're just spiking your cortisol.
100%. That's exactly what I do. Yeah, and you're not even getting the benefit when the cortisol is up, because cortisol is so much more powerful than caffeine. But at that 90-minute mark, that's when the cortisol drops, and you'll get much more benefit.
I wanted to talk about something called the nocebo effect. And it's commonly forgotten about concept in the medicine world. It describes a situation where a negative outcome occurs due to a belief that the intervention will cause harm.
Yeah, the nocebo effect. Oh my gosh, I love this topic. That's cool that you have that as a question. Well, let's talk about the placebo effect, and that'll lead me to the nocebo effect. The placebo effect originated in World War II. So there was a guy named Dr. Henry Beecher. And I'm going to write about this in my book, by the way. Which
I'm really excited about, guys. Me too. You're getting, Ben, for everybody listening, is getting published with a great publishing house. He just signed with them. And this is going to be your 5th book coming out.
Yes.
So, huge congrats on this one.
Thank you, man. Yeah. So the book will have a chapter on about the mindset, how that could heal you or hurt you. And it'll have the story about the placebo effect. So Dr. Henry Beecher was working in these tents for the military, the United States military. And the soldiers were getting bombed. They were going through really excruciating conditions where they were getting their limbs blown off, and they would enter the tent. And Dr. Beecher's job was to give them morphine to stabilize them, because they would go into shock if not and die. And he would stabilize them with the morphine, transfer them to the hospital. They would operate and save their life. But something happened where they ran out of morphine, and the nurses noticed the morphine was out. She didn't know what to do, so she put salt water, saline solution, in the morphine needles, gave it to Dr. Beecher, saying, here's more morphine. Dr. Beecher told the soldiers he was giving them morphine because he thought it was morphine too. And his belief gave them the belief that they were getting morphine, and they stabilized.
That's amazing.
With salt water.
So an energetic transfer of essentially that faith that you're going to be okay. The person's like, okay, I'm going to be okay.
Correct. And then once the World War II was over, Harvard studied what happened in this tent. And that's where they developed the placebo effect, at least the term for it. It always existed. And that's where it started. Right now, all these studies are compared to a placebo effect. So the mind is so powerful, but the mind can work against you as well. And that is the nocebo effect. And I'll give another example of the nocebo effect. And it's a story about, this is a true story, a football stadium in California many, many years ago. There was a football game going on, and it was completely packed. So the entire stadium was filled with people. And 2 people, opposite ends of the stadium, started getting really sick. They started throwing up, projectile vomiting. They were not associated with each other. They didn't know each other, different ends of the stadium. They both ended up going to the medical unit in the stadium grounds. And the doctor was wondering, why are these two people getting so sick? So he would ask them all these different questions to determine the cause. And the only thing they had in common is that they both drink soda from the soda dispensing machines at the facility, at the arena. So he thought there's something wrong with the soda machine.
Yeah.
There's like heavy metals going through, copper, it's making people sick. So what this doctor did, he went on the public address system, told the entire stadium, do not drink from any of the soda dispensing machines. We have two people who are throwing up and really sick. Don't drink from the machine.
Don't do it, yeah.
The second he did that, the entire stadium
started throwing up.
Projectile vomiting. Ambulances coming back and forth, taking people to the hospital. Now, hours later, they determined that there was nothing wrong with the soda machine. It was totally fine. They gave the news to the people and they stopped throwing up in a second, right? So that's the power of the placebo effect and the mind and the nocebo effect. So you want to use it very wisely.
That's such a crazy thing to have been able to, like, for him to bear witness to, essentially, that he makes a call that, listen, don't drink from the soda machines, and everyone starts vomiting. So when it comes to things like, let's say, if we talk about the power of the mind, right? Things like anxiety or depression, you've been through things like that. It just shows you how powerful the mind is, but that's why healing the gut is so important in order to heal the mind. And that's essentially what you've been doing with your health journey, right?
Yeah, everything is connected. The gut's connected to the brain and vice versa, to your point. So anything that happens in the gut happens in the brain. Anything that happens in the brain happens in the gut, back and forth. So when you heal the gut, it makes it a lot easier to heal these other conditions. And the mindset is so important. I mean, belief is arguably the most important thing, to believe that your body could heal itself. I think we live in a world where we're brainwashed to believe that we cannot heal ourselves, that it's a medication that we need, or a surgery, or a vaccine, or a shot. And none of that could replace the world's greatest physician, which is
you and your intuition.
It's our intuition, it's ourselves, it's our innate intelligence. And that's the strongest physician in the world.
I also think it comes down to, we have been conditioned, especially the last 3 to 4 years, into fear. Paralyzed into absolute fear. They don't trust your gut. Listen to the expert, but the experts are not really people you can trust. And so we've lost that connection with our, with our gut, with our intuition, with like, I know better than this, right? And that's where I think a lot of people are getting this anxiety and depression, this huge disconnect. And we're having a huge mental health wave at the moment as well.
To your point, when you live in fear, you can't critically think. It's literally a fact. Like, you take blood flow away from your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking capabilities, and it directs it to your amygdala, which is your fear response part of your brain. And it's all intentionally designed. If you watch the news, you're going to live in fear. We saw what happened the last 4 years with COVID. It's
exactly.
When you could put people in fear, they don't critically think anymore, and you could control them. That's the way it goes. I mean, I'm not trying to be a cynic here.
But it's true.
It's the writing is on the wall. Like, if you haven't seen it by now, I think you just have to turn off the television for a week, and then you'll see it. Just turn off the news. Stop watching the news, and you'll see it.
And also, the news is all manufactured, and it's propaganda, and it's controlled by somebody or the other, and somebody's funding it. So, true journalism is dead. Honestly, in my opinion. And that's why people are turning to other platforms. They're listening to more podcasts. They're listening to independent journalists, and they want to break out of these cages.
You have to be your own N of one. Like I did with my experiment with the carnivore.
Yeah.
Do your own experiment. Like, be your own N of one example. Like, your own experiment, and see what works for you. Don't follow this expert or believe everything you just hear or see. There's so much more to it. And if you do your own experiment, then you could see what works for you or what doesn't. And then you could discard that and go to the next thing.
Right. I was also going to say, now that we're talking about a little bit about mental health and kind of your journey, what you went through, and you had a really low point in your life. When it comes to spirituality, or it comes to mindfulness and things like that, what do you turn to now? Like, what is your go-to for that?
My morning routine. I think it's important to protect the morning. The subconscious mind is the most impressionable first thing in the morning and right before bed. So protecting those 2 times during the day are the most important thing. So number 1 for me, I do not look at my phone when I wake up.
Okay.
Very difficult to do. I know, but I don't, because
for how long?
For an hour.
For an hour.
For an hour. Yeah, maybe even longer. But it's like playing Russian roulette, because I could open up my phone and maybe look at my text messages and see, oh, Iman sent me a beautiful text thanking me for coming on her podcast, and I respond, and that's wonderful. But then it could be something else where it's a problem and I have to put it out right there. And now my morning is ruined, my day is ruined.
You're
so
like, shit.
It's like playing Russian roulette. But when you control that morning and feed that subconscious mind what you want to manifest in your life, it's a game changer. So for me, it's gratitude, it's writing down my goals, it's doing self-development, walking my dog without listening to anything and just doing affirmations in my head. So for me, it's protecting that space. And then even before that, it's controlling your environment, because the way that it works is our environment determines the thoughts that we think and the values that we have. The values that we have and the thoughts that we think determine the actions we take or don't take. And that determines the results we get, and then essentially our destiny. So it starts with our environment. So if there's people in my life who are gossiping about COVID or the president or whatever it is, like, they're not going to be around for too much longer. Or I want to set boundaries with them, because their beliefs and their thoughts and what they're speaking to me now becomes my beliefs and my actions. So I'm really diligent with my environment and protecting that space. Otherwise, I'm just going to repeat what they're repeating to me.
I also said this like a while ago on social media, and I always say this to people around me. It's very important to break out of echo chambers, meaning if people just say yes, 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 and you're all thinking the same, you become like sheep. And that's why introducing like diverse ideas and getting to know other cultural groups and being open-minded is really, really important, because your version is not always the right version. Yeah. And we're seeing that in the world right now, that people are just like stuck on their version and that's it. There's nothing else outside of this. And we've convinced ourselves into this area of like, well, they don't know how I feel. I'm going to deny their trauma. They don't understand me. And that's why it's so important to not only protect your energy, but also to venture out to see, okay, can I understand what you're saying and kind of like address it, and, you know, at least sit with that information. Because when we create these echo chambers and there's no other logic kind of coming in, we just think we're always right.
Yeah, it's so true. You don't want to be in an echo chamber. You're not going to grow. There's no growth there. It's comfortable, but it's not growth oriented. And
I think that happens more in the US than other countries. You know, I grew up in London and there was a lot more cultural diversity. I felt in the US, we sometimes get stuck in these little bubbles and we just don't know how to break out of them. And I think the diverse opinions in our field, especially, like we hear about things all the time and we entertain and we say, hey, let's try this out for ourselves. Let's see what works. So we're always questioning things. But the average person is not. They're just getting fed what they're getting fed and they're living like that.
Yeah, they're going through the motions. It's so true. You know, you mentioned the word sheep, and I'll just say, you know, be careful when you follow the sheep. You're going to end up stepping in shit.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you follow the masses, the M is silent, by the way. Yeah. Right. So typically, if you're like lost in what to do with your if you're lost in what to do with your health and anything, like look at what the masses are doing and just do the opposite, and that's usually going to get you in the right direction.
That's normally the right way to go. Yeah. I also want to talk about, you know, biohacking, but it's also full of a lot of bullshit, right? So I want to hear from you. What are some of the hacks that are working and what stuff is absolute bullshit?
Well, the biggest I guess bullshit or flaw with biohacking is that most biohackers, they violate a principle called hormesis. Okay. So hormesis is simply, you know, we've heard the whole old adage, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that, meaning when you apply a stress and you adapt to the stress, you get stronger and healthier. So exercise, for example, you apply a stress and let's say you recover from it, now you're stronger. But if you did too much exercise and you don't recover, then you get weaker, right? So hormesis means you're staying in this hermetic zone of stress, adaptation, stronger. So a lot of these biohacks are stressors. Red light therapy is a stress. Cold plunge is a stress. Sauna is a stress. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And it's not that they're bad for you. It's that when you do too much too soon and you don't adapt to it, then it becomes bad to you. And so many biohackers violate that principle of hormesis. I'll give you a perfect example. Cold plunging is becoming very, very popular.
Totally, yeah.
And I personally have a cold plunge and I love it. I just did it yesterday. But you ask the average cold plunge coach, whatever they're called, I don't know what their names are, cold plunge coach, how long should we go into the plunge for? Sam or whatever the person's name is, and they're going to say 3 minutes. And that is the wrong advice. If somebody has never done a cold plunge and they do 3 minutes, that's too much stress for that person. It's going to cause anxiety probably. They're going to feel wiped out the rest of the day. The answer is we'll start low and slow and build your way up, right? So with biohacking, the bullshit that I see is that too many people are thinking the same biohack that they're doing is the same biohack that their followers should do. Right. So if Joe Rogan does 20 minutes in a cold plunge, people think they should do 20 minutes in a cold plunge. And I got news for people. Like, I've seen people do cold plunge and actually get a stroke 20 minutes after. When they
because their body completely shuts down. It's too much for you.
Too much stress, right? So don't get me wrong. I love cold plunging, but you got to do it the right way. And that goes for sauna. That goes for exercise. Like, you wouldn't be a couch potato for 10 years and then go do CrossFit for an hour, right? Exactly. You would do, like, there's an on-ramp before you do CrossFit, right? You would work your way up. So that is what I see. People violating hormesis. They don't understand hormesis. They just think everybody should do the same stressors, but that is not the case.
And I think with talking about cold plunging as one example, women in cold plunging is a really different thing, because essentially what you're doing is you're shocking your system when we have ovaries. And it's the time of the month you do cold plunging, but also the duration. So women who are pushing themselves really far. So one study that came out shows that when you cold plunge as a woman, you release more testosterone into your body. So if your body starts developing too much testosterone and overrides some of your other hormones, which can happen because your body's getting hit every single day, let's say with this freezing cold water, that can throw you out of sync.
Yeah, you're perfectly correct. Women do it differently than men as well. And so you mentioned duration, right? So, there's different ways to change it up, right? So my cold plunge gets down to 39 degrees. But that doesn't mean like if Iman's over at my house, I say, go do 39 degrees,
exactly.
right? You would start maybe at, not you, but the person would start maybe like at 60 degrees for like a minute.
Yeah.
And then how do you feel the rest of the day? Oh, Ben, I actually felt good. I got better sleep. I felt energized. Okay, great. So you did 60 degrees at a minute. Next time, let's do 55 degrees at a minute.
Right.
And you just you keep working your way there. But then to your point, like there's different times of your cycle that you want to do more of it. You also want to assess your stress levels going on in life. If you have a lot of stress and you're applying another stress, it might not be a good idea. There's just so many nuances here.
And that's why intuition comes into play, right? You got to trust that everything you're seeing, the hacks and all this information coming at you, what is actually working for you versus what is not at whatever stage in your life you're at.
100% intuition. And
this brings me to something that I do as a closing tradition on the podcast. And you have dropped so much amazing knowledge. So this is going to be an interesting one. What is the one lesson or learning to date that has been crucial for your personal evolution and has carried you throughout your journey?
I love that question. You gave me a little sneak peek of the question. So I read that and I was looking forward to answering that one. The greatest biohack, the greatest lesson that I could share that works for me, and I think it will work for most people, is that, I mentioned our thoughts, right? Our thoughts have the ability to communicate with their DNA. Dr. Bruce Lipton has proven that, world-renowned cell biologist. So thoughts are a frequency. That frequency is communicated to our DNA nucleus at the core. If it's a negative thought, a hateful thought, an angry thought, a resentful thought, the signal sent to the DNA allows the DNA to produce inflammatory proteins. It shortens our telomeres, which damages our DNA and shortens our lifespan, increases inflammation. But if it's a loving thought, a grateful thought, I call it vitamin G, gratitude, an abundant thought, same signal sent, but now the protein that's created by the DNA is an anti-inflammatory protein. The telomeres that protect your DNA are now lengthened and protecting your DNA and extending your lifespan. So if we have 60,000 thoughts per day, which we do, that's a lot of thoughts.
Right.
And our thoughts have the ability to create health or disease. That means we have 60,000 opportunities every day to put the body in either a healing state or an inflammatory state. So for me, that's the greatest biohack, because once you start getting really good at those thoughts and becoming aware, you could essentially change the state of your health in a second and throughout the entire day by changing those thoughts. But the environment, as I mentioned, determines those thoughts. So you got to control the environment,
right? Because
it'll be very difficult to change those thoughts if your environment is toxic.
What is your idea then based on that? Because it's a beautiful way to look at life. What is your idea on toxic positivity though? People who just always just want to be positive and don't want to ever deal with an emotion that comes up and stuff. You're very realistic about things and you like weigh everything out, but there's some people who are just toxically positive, I would say.
Yeah, interesting. I know what you're saying. I haven't heard it quite that way, toxic positivity.
Yeah.
It's funny that you bring that up, because just last night, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but me and my fiance are watching a show called Resident Alien.
Okay.
And it's a sci-fi show. It's actually super silly, but it's funny, and it's actually teaching us like life lessons in the show. I didn't expect it. But one of those lessons, so there's this alien who ended up coming to the United States in a place called Patience, Colorado, a small town. And he looks like a human, right? But he's experiencing all what humans experience. And one of the things is that he is experiencing sadness and he doesn't like it. So he has become toxic.
Toxic positivity. So he's like toxically positive.
I don't even know how to word it right, but he's
positively toxic.
Positively toxic is what I'm trying to say. And he's hiding all his emotions. He's eating all his food. He's like faking it just to like hide. And that's not good, because if you don't experience the pain and the suffering and you're only happy all the time, then there's no balance there. There was actually a Twilight Zone episode when I was a kid, I remember, of this guy who was a very bad guy, and he ended up dying. And he thought he was in heaven. Everything was amazing. Everything was positive. And after a certain amount of time, he ended up hating it. And actually, he was in hell. He wasn't in heaven because he wasn't experiencing both sides. You have to experience both. So without the pain, how could you appreciate the positivity, the positivity and all the happiness and all the great things? So it's important not to suppress that, not to be, to fake it and to pretend that you're positive all the time. It's important to share what's going on with you. So to your point, like that's not healthy. You want to experience both of them. And the more pain you experience, the more suffering, the more it makes you appreciate when things are going right for you.
And I think some of our biggest learning and growth actually happens from a place of, when you're in a downward spiral, right? And you'll always have these shifts. You'll go up, you'll go down, you'll go up and you're down. But some of your biggest learnings happen at those moments that you feel like at a low point. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because the growth from there is absolutely profound. Yeah. And I'm not saying you should ping pong your back on purpose, but every time you do hit a slightly low point in your life or things aren't going right, or let's say you want a job and you're not getting it, whatever it is, it gives you a minute to analyze things and be like, what is the learning from here?
That's right, 100%. Hormesis could be applied there too.
Right?
Those difficult times are stressors, but the more you could adapt to it and respond instead of react, the more mentally resilient you become. So hormesis applies right there as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Ben, for doing this with me. I'm so excited to have brought you on, and I'm such a fan of you and your work. And
likewise,
I'm excited for your book to come out. It's June 2025.
Yeah, you got it right. June 2025. So it's a little ways out, but it'll be out there worldwide.
We're going to bring you back on to promote it and kind of talk about it. Yeah. And this card is everything, guys. I'm going to be downloading this and keeping this with me. So
use it wisely.
Use it wisely and use it freely.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you for the work you're doing, Iman. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.